Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome into Locked On College Football Kickoff Live, your place for all things college football, 11 a.m. to noon Eastern Time, every single Friday, wherever you get your Locked On podcast on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On College Football Kickoff Live your lunchtime listen every Friday. That is Alex Dono of Locked On Canes. That's Kenton Gibbs, Locked On ACC and Locked On Wolfpack. Drake Toll of Locked On Big 12 with you here. And guys, another week of madness in college football with top 25 matchups like Penn State, Ohio State, Tennessee going to Alabama, Duke, Florida State, Utah, USC. But the big story right now, sign stealing in the Big Ten. Michigan, Jim Harbaugh under fire for something, Kenton, that Jim Harbaugh says he had no idea about.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, my pinky had no clue that my thumb picked up a cup today either. Everybody's confused these days. You know what I mean? I don't understand why everybody's after little old Jim Harbaugh, but I will tell you this. If he is, in fact, found guilty of these alleged violations, if he did, in fact, send a staffer to watch Brian Ferentz-led Iowa offense, and then he sent the staffer to watch Minnesota with PJ Fleck and Rowe in the boat. Ladies and gentlemen, he's a sicko. He's a sicko that has violated multiple international laws, and he needs to be on the watch list. He needs to be on the watch list. All I'm saying is, if he violated these rules, he needs to have to go to everybody in his neighborhood, knock on the door and say, I'm Jim Harbaugh. I forced somebody to watch Brian Ferentz offense. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
Dono, I have always heard, I was in and around the Baylor scandal in 2016, which was certainly not close to this, but the one thing that was echoed constantly was the head coach knows everything that happens in a pro. The head coach knows everything that occurs, and that applies for the biggest, the smallest, and scandals like this. I find it hard to believe if this happened that Harbaugh was in the dark.
And that's what should be assumed by the Big Ten, by Michigan, by the NCAA, if these allegations, which are turning into an NCAA investigation, are proven, then you have to assume Jim Harbaugh knew what was going on. And if he didn't, that's on him for hiring the people who are responsible for this. Because right now, what Harbaugh is trying to do through his own statements and through his lawyer is create plausible deniability, right? Where, Tony Soprano didn't necessarily know, or at least thought, you don't know what the guys are up to that are 3 rungs below me, right? That's what Harbaugh is trying to go with here. And I think we're all learning a lot about college football today since these allegations have come out. I will admit, I've covered this sport for a long time. I didn't know that since 1994, you're not allowed to do in-person advanced scouting of opponents, that's an NCAA violation, that you're only allowed to watch film for the simple reason of you're not going to pick things up on film that you would pick up in person, which come to signs and sign stealing opportunities and all of that. And, the person who could end up being the fall guy here, or at least the one that I think Harbaugh is going to make the fall guy here or try to, is a staff member, Connor Stallions, who's an off-field analyst for the Wolverines since May of 2002. That's when the allegations start to come up here. He's been a coach in some capacity at Michigan going back to 2015, where he called himself a volunteer coach at that time. He seems to be the one that the NCAA considers the person of interest for organizing this. But I completely agree with both of you guys. I mean, if this is proven, again, this has got to come down on Harbaugh. And if I'm Michigan and I'm looking at my head coach, well, didn't, we just suspend him, or he suspended himself, or whatever that was, for 3 games for completely separate violations, recruiting violations during COVID. This is just another strike here. So I'm interested to see what comes out of this, and if this could actually put Jim Harbaugh on the hot seat at Michigan.
It's always the weird rogue staffer that did it. It's never the head coach's fault. It's one guy. But Donnie, what year was that he got to Michigan? This assistant coach got to Michigan.
2015.
The guy's been there for 8 years.
Yeah.
The guy's been there for 8 years, and one day woke up and said, I'm going to go underneath the head coach, behind his back, and I'm going to orchestrate this big whole deal where we're going to scout out opposing teams' signals. Kenton, none of this is making any sense.
How about this, okay? I heard that Michigan State is looking for a new head coach. I'm hearing that Michigan may be looking for a new head coach. I've been in North Carolina for about a decade now. I told myself that I was going to avoid coaching. But if need be, I know that y'all got out of paying Mel Tucker $90 million or so. I know that U of M is probably going to get out of paying Harbaugh a ton of money as well. All I'm saying is us three need to get out of this here recording booth and head on up to Michigan, okay? I promise you, we'll run a clean program.
We won't steal signs. We won't steal signs.
I wouldn't know the first thing about how to steal a sign, so we're good.
We won't steal anything but money from the programs. That's it. That's it. We'll get away with some legalized bank robbery. But very seriously, I don't understand what is going on with these coaches, that you are in a position where the world is in your hands. If you look at Michigan's roster, objectively speaking, they are a virtual all-star team compared to the rest of the conference, with the exclusion of Penn State and Ohio State. What are you doing? You don't need to do this. You are better than everybody by a mile. And the part that really blows me about this the most is Jim Harbaugh is a guy who prides himself on doing it the right way, who talks about, some people were born on third base and think they hit a home run. Well, brother, if you illegally stole those bases, you're on third base too, and you didn't hit a triple. So I look at this situation, and it's very disappointing to me because, again, it's very similar to the Mel Tucker situation. And regardless of the legality of what has happened or whatever, this is still a black eye for your university. It's a black eye on your personal profile, and you're potentially forfeiting, and this is crazy to say, 8 figures. Yeah. 8 figures. Over what? For what? If you didn't think your team could win, go to Rich Rod route. Rich Rodriguez ran Michigan into the ground, got his checks, and left. He left. What are we doing here that you feel the need to cheat in this way that is now, after you've already just come back from a suspension, put yourself in more jeopardy?
Yeah. Guys, before we look at the biggest games this week, though, I want to go back and give some credit where it's due to a team like Washington that went out against Oregon, who had some questionable coaching decisions and clock management there late. And Dono, the Huskies remain undefeated and look like a true playoff caliber team right now.
That was top to bottom probably the best college football game I've watched all season. It had a little bit of everything. There were plenty of times when I thought Oregon is going to win this football game. No, Washington is. And, unfortunately, the last gasp came down to a college kicker doing what college kickers sometimes do on the Oregon side. But at the same time, Michael Penix Jr., I thought was, when you look at individual players and that big Penix power, he was probably the biggest individual week. I was wondering if someone would catch that.
Now that's awesome. I think it just took us a second. There's no way Dono said that. The Italian man in the hat, dropping him. Innuendos, usually it's Ken and I, but all right, Dono.
He had
onward.
He had the biggest game a quarterback has had this year, and he had his potential Heisman moment, guys. And, and that's in the very same weekend that last year's Heisman winner probably, unfortunately, took himself out of the running with a tough loss in a 3-interception game in Caleb Williams. So we could see the changing of the guard here, and Michael Penix Jr. now becomes the clear, if he wasn't already, front runner for the Heisman Trophy. And the Washington Huskies, this is a team I am taking very, very seriously as a national championship contender. So that was an unbelievable dub for them.
Kenton, do you buy that? Washington possibly winning a title this year?
Absolutely. That man, Trent Penix, has a rocket for a left arm. I told y'all last week in picking these games, the lucky lefty was going to get it done. And the reality is, Coach Lanning is doing it for substance, not the clicks. He's doing it for substance. That's why he went for it on 4th down all those times. It was
not Hollywood. It's not Hollywood.
It's not Hollywood. They're playing it on the grass. Well, guess what? You just got your tail whooped on the grass, and it's your fault, Dan. Maybe, just maybe, next time, spend a little bit more time focusing on your team and your strengths and weaknesses. And I think the funniest thing about people not looking at his blunder, because I don't think his blunder was as bad as Mario Cristobal's. I don't think it was as bad, but it's near that. It wasn't. It's near that for this reason. 3 different times you go for it on 4. 2 of those you were well within field goal range. If you hit one of those field goals, just one of them, this is an entirely different game. If you hit both, you win. You win the football game. So all in all, I just very much so like to thank Michael Penix for making me right here. I always appreciate being right. And, they say that left-handers are the devil's servants, but guess what? That man was giving them hell all afternoon on that day.
This week, guys, biggest game of the week is really not close. We got a top 10 matchup, 11 a.m. on Fox between Penn State and Ohio State. Locked On Nittany Lions host Zach Seiko joins us now. Zach Seiko, Locked On Nittany Lions, Penn State, Ohio State. Give me your case for those Nittany Lions to get it done in what would be an upset, a 4.5-point upset on the road this week.
Yeah, and for it to be, I mean, it's going to be an upset, but this is a very close game. I mean, the margin's not very far. Penn State, I think, on a neutral field is actually a favorite in this case, but the Nittany Lions have taken a leap forward here. The Ohio State Buckeyes, in my opinion, have taken a slight step back, and Penn State also catches Ohio State. Unfortunately for college football fans, just in a better spot. As a neutral college football fan, Ohio State's banged up and it's not just a couple rotational guys. Travion Henderson, Emeka Egbuka, Mayan Williams, to your top two running backs, to your second best wide receiver with Marvin Harrison Jr. But Penn State, let's not talk about the guys that are unavailable for Ohio State. How about the guys that are available for Penn State? I mean, this is a team that is littered with first-round talent, specifically on defense. Kalen King, Chop Robinson. I'd even argue that Curtis Jacobs could be a fringe day one pick. But and then just factor in that Penn State now has Drew Aller, Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen. On offense, the talent is there, and Penn State has finally closed that gap that was pretty wide, especially the past 3 seasons between these two teams.
Wow, always great to hear a technician get love on this show. You knew I was going to do it as soon as you shouted out Kalen King. But now, let me ask you this. Last time you were here, I asked you who the unheralded players are that could show out and have a big game. But let's just be honest. There is a reason that they're the underdogs. Who are the players that you're looking at on Penn State that you're saying, this player has to have a big game? They may not be a household name, but this player, if they have a big game, if they do a good job of neutralizing such and so from Ohio State, we win this game hands down. Who are you looking at?
Well, Kenton, I appreciate that question. I actually already had a little bit of preparation for this because I did that in my individual game preview on Locked On Nittany Lions. Dante Cephas. It is Dante Cephas who transferred in Kent State, all the lofty expectations that, hey, this was the next guy or this was the one that was going to at least help Penn State because the wide receiver room is one of the weaker links on the team if you can find any on this Penn State team. Dante Cephas is quick. He's fast. He's the one that gives you that deep threat ability. You look at the statistics, Penn State has only attempted 11 passes of 20 plus or more yards with Drew Aller at quarterback, who has one of the better arms in the country, in all of the country, and nobody has stretched the field. Nobody has tried to stretch the field. Dante Cephas has done this once. And I think about this. Penn State has been very tight to the vest with what they want to show anybody because they've had that fortune. You played that type of schedule. I get it. They're not battle tested, but that was also an opportunity for them to conceal some plays that they're going to need against Ohio State and Michigan. Penn State's thinking long term here. Why would you call these kinds of plays against Illinois, Northwestern, Delaware, even Iowa? You were able to hide some stuff away from Iowa, who's probably going to go 11-1 and be the team in the Big Ten West. Dante Cephas needs to become that household name because now you've had the bye week. There's no excuses anymore. Well, he transferred in late. There's some things he needs to pick up with the playbook. That's at this point, now that you're past the bye week, that can't be the excuse anymore. I was making that excuse for him. I've run out of time here. If Penn State wants to help out the run game in itself, keep Ohio State's defense honest, Dante Cephas over the top, at least to open things up schematically so that the ground game isn't smothered by a Jim Knowles who's going to try to sell out for it with cover 0.
And 2 incredible defenses in this game. Ohio State in the top 10, Penn State number 1, and Manny Diaz doing a tremendous job. I didn't love him as a head coach in Miami, but I absolutely loved him and still love him as a defensive coordinator. What are some of the key matchups there? Because obviously Ohio State littered with top wide receivers left and right, and their offense seems to be finding themselves. They're a lot better than they were at the start of the year.
Yeah, that's definitely the case, and that's going to happen with a first-year starter in quarterback Kyle McCord, a first-year offensive coordinator in Brian Hartline. Those when you make that kind of change, I think that hasn't been talked enough about for the Buckeyes here, but now they're at the midseason point too. Same thing with Penn State. They've had to kind of figure it out with a new starting quarterback and some small changes here and there. As far as what you're asking about defensive matchups, it's that pass rush, that blitz heavy defense from Manny Diaz, who calls havoc type plays, blitz plays 56% of the time. That leads the country, and it's not even close. And the Ohio State offensive line, typically a top 5 unit, at least over the past 5 years, has taken a significant step back, and the tackles are more unreliable. The interior of the offensive line for the Buckeyes, pretty good. They returned 2 starters at guard, but the tackles, that's your questionable play. And where does all of Penn State's pressure come from? On the outside, Chop Robinson, Adisa Isaac, and then you send those cornerback blitzes from any which way. And Kyle McCord, a first-time starter. CJ Stroud didn't run a lot, but CJ Stroud was mobile. He could tuck it and run when he had to. And Justin Fields, we know he was a true dual threat quarterback. Kyle McCord is not that. So that's the matchup I'm really honing in on from Penn State's defensive perspective. And it helps when Henderson is not 100%. Don't know if he's going to play or not. Same thing with Mayan Williams. And then Emeka Ibuka. So you can focus a little more on Marvin Harrison Jr. because a Julian Fleming and those inexperienced freshmen, with all the potential in the world, I get it, are not where they need to be for this game specifically.
Zach Seiko, Locked On Nittany Lions. Before we get you out of here, give me a score prediction on this game with Ohio State and Penn State.
The total's taken a nosedive, and rightfully so. I mean, both these teams statistically are very good defensively. Penn State averaging 1 point. Everyone talks about the secondary. The run defense has allowed just 1.8 yards per carry. That's Madden on rookie mode and franchise type of numbers here. Yeah. So the Nittany Lions, I get it. The competition hasn't been the greatest. Ohio State has been battle tested with Notre Dame. Penn State played Iowa and West Virginia and handled them pretty well. We're finding out. Drake, you know this. West Virginia is much better than advertised. I'm going to go 27-22. It's going to be I go with the weird score for Ohio State because I don't think they'll have any problems moving the football. It's getting down into the red zone where they've been average. They've been okay. And Penn State, especially if you don't have Henderson and Williams at full strength and the play gets a little tighter down there, you're not going to, when it gets too close to the end zone, you are not going to have that capability of pushing the line of scrimmage forward. And Ohio State's going to settle for field goals. Penn State's going to get that pressure, cause some turnovers and short fields. And what they've been doing, grinding opponents down to a victory. 27-22 Penn State.
Not just a cover, an outright win for the Nittany Lions. That's Zach Seiko of Locked On Nittany Lions. Zach, thanks for joining Locked On College Football Kickoff Live.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me back. Appreciate it.
Guys, if you've benefited from therapy, I know I have, or you want to give it a try, you need to give BetterHelp a try. This show is brought to you by BetterHelp. Folks, sometimes in life, you may struggle to manage your time. Your brain never stops moving. I know at times I've struggled with managing my family life with my work life. If you've been thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And if for whatever reason you want to find a different match, you can switch therapists anytime at no additional charge. Make your brain your friend again with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnCollege today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, H-E-L-P, BetterHelp.com/LockedOnCollege.
Guys, it is time for my favorite segment. That is Tell Me Why. And before we get into, here's a little extra this week. And before we get into the actual Tell Me Whys and clips from across the channel here, Ken, I think I'm sold on the Penn State Nittany Lions. This was not an emotional Zach Seiko. This was not an overly charged, fired up for a big game Zach Seiko. This was numbers, facts, figures, who plays, who doesn't. Penn State has the edge in this game somehow.
Drake told, I need you to do your best Harbaugh impression and go watch that young man record his shows in person because that was a fired up Zach Saco. I'm sorry to tell you.
Oh no, that was not emotionally charged.
That young man is very even keeled. He's a smooth operator. I'm telling you, he never gets too high, never gets too low. Regardless of what's going on with Penn State, he's gonna come on and be the same guy. But I'll tell you this. I'm sold too. I love Penn State in this one too, because number one, Ohio State is banged up, which he referenced earlier. But number two, we talk about Ohio State is battle tested against some better teams and all that. I'm just gonna be honest. Notre Dame has a ton of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in them. And even beyond that, in terms of your physical play, they finished out the game with 10 players on the field for the last 2 plays. And where was the ball run, Dono? You watched that game. Where was that ball run, Dono?
Oh, in the middle?
It was ran where the 11th guy would have been.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, where the 11th guy
more specific, Dono. He's a football player.
10 men on the field.
But that's my point. Penn State's not going to have that problem. James Franklin has historically had troubles winning the big one, right? That's been the thing. But here's the thing. James Franklin has never had the horses in the stable that he has right now. I think it's fair to have that criticism of coaches who have had all the biggest names, all the stars, all that. James Franklin is just now getting that, and I think that he shows it. I think he shows why, at the end of the day, there are questions about Ryan Day's ability to win a big game as well, and I think that this one elevates those questions up until he plays that school up north.
Yeah, Dono, you buying that here. You like Penn State.
You can sell me as far as covering the 4.5 point spread. I'm going to stick with that. So I am betting Penn State plus 4.5. At the same time, I think this is going to be a very close game. I like how Zach mentioned if it was, at a neutral site or if it was at Happy Valley, of course, Penn State would probably be favored. I do still see value when Ohio State is the home team in a tough place to play, packing over 100,000 fans in there. The injuries on the Ohio State concern me. From a Penn State side, listen, I know we can say it 100 different times. They have been a dink and dunk team this year, whether that's just by design or taking what the defenses give to them. I still can't automatically say, hey, the downfield passing game is going to go from 0 to 60 against Ohio State's top 10 defense. So, as far as picking a straight up winner, I could see Ohio State winning by a point, 3 points, but I am taking Penn State plus 4.5.
So we got a comment here from Mr. Jones. The Big Ten is weak. In the SEC, Ohio State would be Kentucky. Now that seems pretty hyperbolic to me, guys. You can see Kenton Gibbs, see you rolling your eyes here for Mr. Jones. Pass me a bottle. This guy's obviously been drinking, Kenton.
He hasn't just been drinking. Get him blood tested. Get USADA involved.
Can I get a Counting Crows reference? Anybody here?
Listen, all I'm saying is let's see if he's off some beaver tranquilizers or something like that as well, because this is ridiculous. Where does the SEC get off? I get it. You've won a lot of championships. You have historically been the best. I'll give you every bit of props for that. I'll give you every bit of kudos. Clap it up for the SEC, everybody. Clap it up for the SEC. But yesterday's price is not today's price, in the words of Fat Joe. Yesterday's price is not today's price. We live in a performance, what have you done for me lately industry. And last time I checked, folks, the SEC did not have a winning record out of conference against the Power 5 this year, did they?
3-6, right?
3-6. Oh, okay. So somehow I'm supposed to believe that this 3-6 conference, the conference that made North Carolina look unbeatable, made their defense look like the 85 Bears, the conference that made Quinn Ewers look like the next coming of Peyton Manning, the conference that had multiple teams walk into their trap and take over their trap in non-conference, all of a sudden, because they're playing each other and it's somebody's sorting to the top, oh, they're the best. Oh, the Big Ten can't compete. Oh, no.
Ohio State's just Kentucky.
Come on. Ohio State is Kentucky. I'm going to just tell you this. I hate to quote Tar Heels, but I'm going to have to do it. I'm going to have to quote the most famous Tar Heel of all time. Stop it. Get some help.
Mr. Jones, having grown up in Arkansas, SEC country, I think Ohio State is Vanderbilt. I love the sentiment there, Mr. Jones. Thank you very much.
Well, and I'll give Mr. Jones a pass because I've driven through SEC country before, specifically when you get into Kentucky and Louisiana. Every few miles, there are whiskey distilleries. So, if he's taking those tours, getting those samples, I'm going to give the guy a pass. And listen, there have been some years where you can make that argument. A lot of years where you can say, oh, the second or third best team in the Big Ten would be Kentucky in the SEC. This is just not the year to make that argument. Feel free to watch Fox at noon on a Saturday and see what some of the other conferences are doing. You don't have to just stick to the SEC.
You know what, guys? Ohio State is the Kentucky of the Big Ten. This is a top 2 team in the SEC East, maybe a top 3 or 4 team in the league overall. So maybe this Mr. Jones is not slighting Ohio State. He's given some beef to Kentucky here. Let's consider all things.
Okay.
As we roll through, sell me why. We love a good rivalry game, right? This is not that. Michigan State and Michigan is supposed to be a big one. Tale of 2 teams on 2 very different planets this season. 24.5-point underdogs. Michigan State at FanDuel.com. It'd be the first night game in East Lansing between these 2 teams. This rivalry, the pride, is all of that enough to help Sparty cover 24 points against a Michigan team that's blown everybody out? Here's Locked On Spartans host Matt Sheehan to tell me why on Michigan State.
Matt Sheehan, Locked On Spartans, and hello, Mark. How are you doing today? Why should you take Michigan State plus 24.5 against a juggernaut like Michigan, and a juggernaut that may or may not spy on every single team it plays? Well, look, it fits every stereotype of, this is Michigan State's Super Bowl coming up this year. I mean, find another game on the schedule that's going to be as big as this one for the green and white. I'm not sure if a luxurious bowl game is in the future, so they're going to give every single ounce into this game. Now, just all that rah-rah stuff aside, it's going to be a nasty game in the state of Michigan, and with 24.5 points, that's a big total. We'll see if they can get the air raid going on the Wolverines side of things, and also I'm going to leave you with this little nugget here. Michigan State at home, whether they're a good team, whether they're a bad team, they have covered 6 of their last 7 games against the Wolverines at Spartan Stadium. They'd show up. They show up when it's time to play those guys at home. So, 24.5 points. That's why you take it.
I mean, we are really not talking enough about how Michigan State's offense is Iowa in disguise most weeks. This is not a good Michigan State team. And I get it, right? The Mel Tucker situation, these kids are reeling. We're talking about 18, 19, 20-year-old kids going out there. So I understand it. But, Kenton, this Michigan team's been rolling through everybody. I don't know if I see why this week's different.
We need to rename this segment Sell Me Spies, because I don't care if they got the KGB, the MI6, the CIA. I don't care who Michigan got spied. Michigan is going to dominate this game. Yeah. Here's the thing. Michigan State,
by the way, they have already scouted out Michigan State based on what we know.
Report away.
Yeah, they've already got it.
And not only that, here's the biggest thing that I look at when I talk about this game. Michigan State has gotten better every week in terms of their losses have been closer ever since that Washington loss, and they've gotten closer and closer and closer. They're going to be a team that still doesn't feel good about themselves. A closer loss is still a loss. It's still a game that you look at and you say, man, this did not go the way we wanted it to. Yeah. I know that their coach is going to say, hey, we're right there, guys. We're right there on the precipice. And then they'll see Blake Corum run by, and he won't be this close. He'll be a little bit further. And then they'll see Roman run by, and he won't be this close. He'll be a little further. They'll see J.J. McCarthy dotting up more folks deep, and they won't be this close. 24 is perfect because that's a game that, I know that there is an actual rivalry named Clean Old Fashioned Hate. I believe that's Georgia and Georgia Tech. But this is really, these two really hate each other. Like, this is real life. Like, oh, you're little brother, we're big brother. Michigan loves the big brother thing, and they take every opportunity they can to kind of, hold their what's on these guys and say, hey, we're big brother. And Michigan State does everything they can to stop it. They just don't have the guys this year. They don't have a coach this year. Michigan covers easily.
Yeah, Dono, I think I'm there.
Yeah, I mean, Michigan obviously has a big quarterback advantage with J.J. McCarthy playing on he's not going to win the Heisman, but he's playing at a Heisman candidacy type of level. He's not taking that from Penix, but he's playing very well. And then another way to look at it, guys, is obviously Michigan is the better team. And I know Michigan State, if there's one game to get up for emotionally, it's this one. But still, going back to Michigan, who I think is going to cover this big spread, I think about the way that this now scandal could affect Jim Harbaugh's mindset. He's not going to call off the dogs, right? I mean, you think about it. If Michigan, who I believe is head and shoulders the better team here, they've got a three touchdown, 24-point lead in the fourth quarter. I think Harbaugh may take some of his frustrations out on Sparty this weekend. And so I'm, normally I'd look at this and say, maybe they cover 24.5, looking at Michigan State. I don't think this is the week for that. I think Michigan wins by 5 touchdowns.
Now, wait a second. We know that Michigan State has said that they don't care. They'll play this game. They've already given the check. Remember the Incredibles? When it's dashed so fast and Mr. Incredible keeps going, hey, whoa, slow it up. He wants them to get second in the track meet and not look too fishy. What if Harbaugh's like, hey, listen, hey, run it inside the 10 and slow it down. Slow it down a little bit. Not act like we're reading plays over here.
Let me quote another Michigan legend, Instagram comedian HaHa Davis. By the end of this game, Michigan State will be asking, big fella, what is your frustration? Because there is going to be some ugliness on that field. Again, this goes back decades. As a Detroit, Michigan kid here, I am telling you, I know exactly what this is like. This game here, again, there's already hate here. You know that Michigan State fans are going to heckle and call them cheaters and all that. And if I know anything about Harbaugh, he is unapologetically himself. That is one thing that he lost out on the top recruit because he would not take his football cleats off in that young man's house. That is how committed to the bit Harbaugh is. There is no slowing down. If he had Dash would have won that race in 0.1 second. They would have went ahead, fired the pistol, and Dash would have been looking back at everybody like, oh, these guys still running? What's going on here?
I love it. Well, look, let's go to the Pac-12, which we gave a little love to. Oregon, Washington. This week, another big matchup that's being overlooked at this point. It's a top 20 matchup. It is USC and Utah. Utah is ranked 14th, which is higher than USC. They're at 18 now after the loss. Are they fraudulent? Many are asking. The Utes find themselves at 7-point underdogs anyway. That on FanDuel. Locked On Utes host JT Worcestershire.
The Utah Utes can absolutely cover the 7-point spread on the road in the Coliseum as they take on the USC Trojans. Hello, everyone. JT Worcestershire of Locked On Utes here. And I know a lot of people are going to be high on USC because Utah doesn't have Cam Rising. But football games are not just won in the quarterback battle. They're also won at the line of scrimmage. And Utah has the number 1 defense in terms of rush yards allowed in the FBS. Also, this Utah team ranks top 10 in sacks, and no one in Power 5 football right now has more sacks than Jonah Ellis. So look for Utah to stop the run and get after Caleb Williams at a high level. And when you do that, you turn Caleb Williams over. Utah may not win this game. I think they have a good shot to do so, but I do believe they will cover the 7-point spread because the defense is going to have another dominant outing and the offense will do just enough.
Yeah, it's JT Worcestershire sauce. I have confirmed. I've had it on my show like 4 times, and it's at the company. It's the one name. It's like there's so many consonants going on here. Kenton, Utah, USC this week. I'm not buying the Utes. I don't know if I'm buying the Utes without Cam Rising. And guess what? I'm also not buying the Trojans. There's a big paint drying competition over in Groesbeck, Texas this week. I'm gonna have to get myself out there. I don't know if I can make this game.
You know. As poorly as we saw Caleb Williams play last week, let me go ahead and quote Aaliyah here. If at first you don't succeed, dust yourself off and try again.
You're quoting a lot of people here today, Chris.
Hey, there's a lot of quotable folks in the world, but I got to give this game to USC because, and I think that they cover as well because while their defense is very suspect, so is Utah's offense. Like we've seen at multiple points this year that offense, I'm not saying that you ever seen the meme where they said they're almost every quarterback in the NFL is Kirk Cousins? All I'm saying is there are a lot of college offenses that are Iowa. And Utah at times this year has looked like Iowa West. And with that being said, I'm not sure even against the fraudulent defense that they can keep up with Caleb Williams and company.
Dono.
Oh, I'm buying low on USC. I think coming off of, last week's debacle against Notre Dame, a 48-20 loss. I think that's influencing the betting public. I think that's influencing the odds makers. I think this spread would be and should be bigger in USC's favor, if not for last week. Obviously, USC has big question marks on defense, but Utah without Rising, that's just not the team to exploit that well enough to win this game. And I'm expecting a big-time bounce-back performance for Lincoln Riley's offense and Caleb Williams and company. So I'm going USC to cover. They're a good team, not a great team, but they're good enough to win this game by more than a touchdown.
Here is one that won't be close. Staying in the Pac-12. It's number 5 Washington, unranked Arizona State in Seattle. Arizona State's lone win of the season, week 1 against Southern Utah. The question here isn't can Arizona State win, but can Washington run up the score after last week's close win over Oregon? Can they cover 27.5? Here to sell us why they can do that is Locked On Huskies host Roman Tomasoff.
The Washington Huskies can absolutely cover this 27.5-point spread against the Arizona State Sun Devils. I'm Roman Tomashoff of Locked On Huskies. And the first thing we have to think about is, of course, Heisman favorite Michael Penix Jr. That's right. The Husky quarterback has been just fantastic this season, leading the Huskies to not only a 6-0 record and the number 5 spot in the AP poll, but the Huskies have at the very least pushed, or if not covered the spread in every single game this season. The only one they even, considered pushing was against Oregon this last week. And Michael Penix has just done a fantastic job just throwing the ball all over the yard. This Arizona State defense is not great. And the other thing that we need to think about is Washington's defense has a chance to really get right against one of the worst offenses in the Pac-12. So with that being said, I think the Huskies can force a couple of turnovers, maybe even get 3-4 sacks on this Arizona State offensive line. And with the way that they put up points, I think that it's very easy that the Huskies can cover the spread this weekend.
Yeah, here's what I'm hearing, Dono. Washington good, Arizona State bad. That's enough for me.
I'm passing on this one. I'm not going to pass on talking about it, but I'm going to pass on betting on it. Can Washington cover 27.5 points against a bad Arizona State team? Sure. Should they? Probably. But I'm passing on a number that big coming off a game as big as Washington just had, right? You know, one of the biggest wins any team in college football is going to have regular season all year long. There's obviously an opportunity at a letdown. Now, a letdown game for Washington is still good enough to beat Arizona State relatively easily. But with that said, I'm not betting minus 27.5, not after last week. There could be a bit of a letdown and a hangover. I'm staying far, far away from this one.
Yep. Kenton, final score 48-24 is not a cover here.
Here's the thing. Arizona State is not a good team. They are 2-4 against the spread this year. Penix has looked amazing, but let me tell you something about that 2-4 against the spread. Their only 2 wins against the spread have come when the opponent has double digits to cover. I think this is another one of those games that, Arizona State, the public perception of them is a little worse than they actually are, number one. I'm not saying they're a good team. I'm just saying everybody thinks that they should be relegated down to FCS immediately, which I think a little bit of a reach there. And even beyond that, I'm looking at this Arizona State team and I'm saying to myself, y'all probably don't need to do that much to not lose by darn near 30 or 30 plus in a game where, again, watch this coming off a huge, very explosive win where that they gave everything they had. They're going, it's all right, take it easy their way into a 14 to 20 point win this week.
Guys, I'm starting to break out in hives. We've spent so long not talking about the SEC. Let's get back to it. Tennessee and Alabama this week, one of the biggest games in the country. We will be joined coming up next by Luke Robinson, host of Locked On Bama. But first, Dono.
Guys, you got to snap into action this football season, this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. We've just heard all these sell me whys. Right now, new customers at FanDuel get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. So if you've heard us talking about all these numbers and these lines, you want to sign up today. It's a great time to do it because you get $200 in bonus bets, win or lose, at FanDuel right now. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, so much more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
Now we bring in Luke Robinson of Locked On Bama. Luke, before we get into this Tennessee matchup this week, we've got Alabama as still a heavy playoff contender while so many in the country have written this team off after that Texas loss. I know Alex and Kenton both have some questions about this game, but I want to go more holistic. This Bama team, to you, are they playoff caliber right now?
This year, yes. I think in years past, no. And I mean, the problem with Alabama is they're generally compared to other Alabama teams. I mean, is this team as good as the one that had Tua and Jalen Hurts and Damian Harris and Josh Jacobs and Najee Harris and blah, blah, blah? No, it's not. I mean, it's just not. But this year in college football, it's just not a great year. It's the teams are pretty good, but they're not great. I would not put them up there with, Bama 2020, LSU 2019. I just wouldn't do it. But so, yeah, I think they've got a shot. Now, the other thing is the schedule sets up pretty nicely. In fact, I would say it sets up just right for Alabama. You play Tennessee, who is ranked enough and who's good enough to at least give you some credit, not take away from what you accomplished. Then you welcome in LSU. I assume they'll take care of Army this weekend. LSU, Bama could be a game day type scenario because that's going to be one of the biggest games. It's going to be 7 o'clock. CBS is going to be a big deal. A lot of eyeballs on it. Then you go to Kentucky. Again, I know Kentucky's lost 2 in a row. They hadn't looked really great of late. But Kentucky is one of those teams that has garnered some respect. So it's not the Kentucky of 15, 20 years ago. Then, of course, you have the Iron Bowl. And, look, we all know when you play Auburn in Jordan-Hare Stadium, that place is an Indian burial ground made out of crashed UFOs. Strange things happen. People are going to give you credit for it. And so that's good. And then, of course, you probably play a Georgia team that is either going to only have one loss or maybe be undefeated. And if you can take care of that, there's no way you keep Alabama out of the playoffs.
Yeah, I 1,000% agree there. In terms of this game in particular, right? What is the one thing that concerns you most about Tennessee? What is the one thing that you look at with Tennessee where you say, if Bama ends up losing this, it'll be because this thing happened with Tennessee?
Yeah, the only thing better than the rush at Alabama when it comes to sororities is the rush for Tennessee on the pass rusher. On the passer. They get after it. And Alabama doesn't protect their passer very well. Look, Jalen Milroe is very big, very strong, very athletic, very fast, very mobile, and he's getting sacked about 5 times a game. That's a problem. And I don't think Alabama's played a pass rush quite as good as this Tennessee one. Now, A&M's up there. A&M's very, very good. And the difference was we played A&M on the road and we play Tennessee at home. So maybe that helps Alabama and keeps them from 1 extra sack. But I think the goal is going to be don't give up any more than 5 sacks. I think at this point, as an Alabama fan, we're all relegated to, hey, we're going to be sacked 5 times, whether it's all on the offensive line, whether it's Jalen Milroe not throwing the ball away when he should or not taking off and trying to get some extra yards, whatever the case may be, 5 sacks is going to be what it is. Don't give up like 8 or 9 sacks. That's going to be the biggest thing. And I'm telling you, it's a threat to happen.
So last week against Arkansas, obviously a lot closer than it should have been, but I think it can be a good thing when a great team kind of escapes with a narrow win. I'm sure Nick Saban has taken a lot of teachable moments out of that Arkansas game. What has the message been from Nick this week, and how do you expect them to respond?
Saban is trying so hard. You can read it in between the lines here. He's trying so hard to figure out what's going to press this team's buttons. This team has not put together a full game yet. Jimmy Stein and I say it on Locked on Bama all the time. A team plays its best once or twice a year, its worst once or twice a year, and everything in between is what you actually are. And I think Alabama has sort of been what they are this entire time. So maybe they'll put together one of their better games. They're sort of due for one. It would be nice to see. But as far as a message goes, look, this team is sort of a hodgepodge. Nobody has stepped up to be an actual leader. That was kind of a problem last year. I love Bryce Young. I've made the argument, I'm sort of walking this back, but I've made the argument Bryce Young may be the best player in Alabama history. The difference, from him and some of these other guys, he didn't have the weapons outside of Jamison Williams and John Mechie that first year where he played great, but then both of them go out in the national championship game. So he wasn't able to bring home the title. But we didn't have a leader last year. Bryce Young is sort of a quiet dude. And he leads by example more than anything, but he's not going to get in your face. And Will Anderson, as awesome as he's being in the pros and as awesome as he was at Alabama, he didn't seem to get into everybody's face either. So we missed that, having that dog in somebody that really got after it. And I think Nick Saban is looking for somebody to step up and take that role because he's tried everything. You can tell he's tried sort of getting on to him. That hadn't worked necessarily. And again, I go back to the hodgepodge statement where you've got these true freshmen that you can tell are really talented, like a Caden Proctor, but he's not putting it together yet. Then you've got some guys that are transfers. You've got a quarterback that everybody hadn't completely bought into just yet. They bought into him more than they had, but he's not. Everybody's not totally sold on him just yet, and that includes the fans. So I think that there's it's going to be one of those trial by error things all season long. But if they can ever put it together, this Alabama team in the end has as much talent as anybody.
Luke, give me a final score prediction. Alabama, Tennessee in Tuscaloosa this week.
All right, I'm going to stick with this because I just sort of pulled it out of the air a couple of days ago, and it would be sort of cheap to change it.
Yeah,
I'm going 1914, which is a throwback to the 2015 game. I know it's kind of stinky considering in this day and age of offense. But look, these with the new clock rules, and you say, all you're missing is 5 or 6 plays. Those are a pretty big deal with these two offenses. I mean, Tennessee is a running team. Alabama, yes, they can have the big plays. But if they don't hit a big play, Alabama's had some problems doing anything else. So, and their running game hadn't really busted out just yet.
Yeah. So
I think that we're going to see a lot of 2, 3, 4-yard gains in this game, maybe a couple of sacks, maybe not 3 and outs, but like you're going to have a first down and then a 3 and out after that. So we're going to have the punters are going to get some workouts. And this is a throwback to the 2015 game where Alabama won 19-14 and, 2 great defenses. I sort of see this and 2 quarterbacks, by the way, that almost mirror each other, except for the fact that Milroe's been sacked 26 times and Milton's only been sacked 8.
Yeah. Luke Robinson of Locked On Bama, playoff hopeful. Thanks for joining Locked On College Football Kickoff Live.
Thank you guys for having me.
My legs feel great, and they look really good in my Bird Dog shorts. Guys, I've been loving Bird Dogs since they came aboard here at Locked On. They've opened my mind. Bird Dog stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and the leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. Bird Dog shorts, they do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but they fit way better. I've tried them both. I can vouch for that. They fit way better than regular shorts that are made of a stiff, restricting cotton. Bird Dogs fixed this issue by inventing cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki, but it stretches to give you a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. And I need this in Florida badly. Bird Dogs uses anti-stink sweat wicking fabric to keep it cool and dry all day long. They are functional for every occasion, guys. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnCollege or enter promo code LockedOnCollege at checkout for a free Bird Dogs water bottle with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnCollege for a free water bottle at checkout. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you.
All right, guys, it's time for game time decisions, some booms, some busts. Let's wrap up today's show with everything you need to know this week in college football. We'll go boom or bust first. And Dono, I'm gonna pitch it to you here. You're usually pretty rosy with your booms, your busts. Where are you leaning this week? Do you give me a boom? You give me a bust? What do you got?
As much as I'd like to give you booms only, I can't ignore USC. That was a train wreck last week, and I think at least 2 of us, if not 3 of us on the panel, did predict Notre Dame to win the game because of USC's questionable defense. But what I did not expect was 3 interceptions by Caleb Williams, the constant pressure and duress that Notre Dame put him under. So it wasn't just USC's defense. It was their offense and their Heisman winner as well that let them down last week. And even though I do think the Trojans will respond this week, they've got to get a bust last week because that's the type of game that obviously is going to haunt you when you're trying to get into the college football playoff. And unfortunately for Caleb Williams, that performance probably takes him completely out of Heisman contention. So that is my bust. For my boom, Mizzou got a big win last week, but I want to go. Sorry, Kenton, if I took yours,
my boom.
You can go into more detail. I'll let you have the rest of that because for my boom, I go individual. I don't know if we're allowed to do this, but Michael Penix Jr., I thought nobody raised their stock high, and the stock was already soaring, but it's booming now to the moon. Nobody raised their stock higher last week, getting that win with that throw that he made, in addition to a bunch of other tremendous throws that he made. That was a Heisman moment for the Heisman Trophy frontrunner. That's going to be on every highlight reel when he receives that award in a couple of months in New York. So Michael Penix Jr. is my boom.
Ken.
Yeah, so he got me with the Mizzou boom, and that's all right. It's okay. I'm gonna tell you this: if we're talking individual players, Luther Burden III, okay? He's a receiver out of Missouri. He had 100 yards per game, or over 100 yards, actually, well over 100 yards. The lowest that he had in any of the 5 games leading up to this was 114 yards. Last week, 2 receptions for 15 yards. He's coming back with a vengeance. He's going to do something crazy this week. I'm already expecting it. I'm already calling it. I'm already seeing it. And my bust for the week, I hate to have to do this, but too many people say I'm biased and they say I'm a homer and they say,
do it.
So I'm going to bring them on down to the carpet. Dave Doran and the NC State Wolfpack, come on down. You let a team beat you completing 4 passes?
Ugh.
4 passes with a backup quarterback. Wait a minute. There's more. You let a team beat you and you had more drops than they had completions. You let a team, the lowest average score in the ACC, the lowest scoring offense in the ACC is Virginia. Averages 22.3 points or something along those lines. You put up 3.
Yeah.
You couldn't score a point per quarter. Yeah. Come on down. Bust of the week. A team that many people saw as the dark horse of the season. That had to be a low moment. I expect the Pack to bounce back. I really do. I expect them to be better going forward. But they need to be called to the carpet for what was an abysmal performance last Saturday in Wallace Wade.
Non-competitive is the way I would say. Non-competitive. Give me my boom this week is a team that we didn't talk about much past their loss to Washington State, but it's Oregon State. And the reason I put the Beavs as my boom is we're going to look up in a few weeks at 9-1 Oregon State and think, wait a second. Here's a team that is fighting to stay relevant in college football and be in a Power 5 conference who might win their Power 5 conference championship in its last year of existence. They're at Arizona this week after a double-digit win against UCLA. That's probably a win, though Arizona also a booming team right now who's been pretty even keel this year. At Colorado, that's a win for the Beavs. Stanford, give it to them. 9-1 going into Washington and then Oregon. Certainly they should lose those games, but now the story flips. It's not, Oregon State's just piddling around playing Washington or Oregon. Now this team looks pretty legit. Oregon State, a boom. And guys, we can't let them escape. We can't let Louisville escape without giving them a bust.
Yeah.
Talk about non-competitive. This game in the second half, the Cardinals were held scoreless. They were 7-point favorites last week. What did I say? Rat line. And it wasn't just a cover for Pitt. They won by 17 points. Kenton, I will pitch this one to you really quick before we get into our game time decisions because you're locked on ACC. This was bad.
Oh, it was god-awful. It was god-awful. And if you listen to Locked on ACC, which I hope you all do, I've said multiple times on the show, if Jack Plummer can put out 5 elite performances, just 5 elite performances on the season, this team will be A-okay. Yeah. He clearly was not elite in this game. His wide receivers did not help him. A lot of drops there. It was a tough game overall for Louisville. And this wasn't really a game that you look at and you say, man, Louisville is just, they just are showing up and they just got all the bad breaks. No. Pitt was creating the bad breaks, henceforth breaking their spirit, henceforth breaking their undefeatedness, henceforth breaking what honestly and truly could have been something super special for Louisville in terms of potentially running the table and getting to an ACC championship. All of that was broken. And of course, who was it broken by? A Pitt team with MJ Devonshire on it. Every time you see or hear the name MJ Devonshire, it's a pick six. Remember last year against West Virginia? Pitt six. This year, another Pitt six. MJ Devonshire is Johnny on the spot whenever you need him, but Louisville threw it right to the boy. It's been a tough week for Louisville fans, and we're not going to end it nicely here.
Ken Gibbs said they might be last year. Could they be a TCU type in the ACC? Could they be that team that? Nope, they lost to Pittsburgh.
No,
they lost to
not
Pitt.
at all.
College football's biggest games this week. Let's go through and pick them. We start in the Southeastern Conference. Tennessee, Alabama. Dono, who do you like to win this game in Tuscaloosa?
Oh, I like Alabama, and it goes back to the conversation we had with Luke. You guys know I like to buy low. That was just uninspiring football that Bama played, nearly blowing an 18-point lead against a bad Arkansas team. Nick Saban, like Luke said, is always trying to figure out a way to push his team's buttons. I think, bouncing back, it was a dub last week, but bouncing back with a better performance against a ranked opponent is something I expect the Crimson Tide to do. I also don't trust the Tennessee Volunteers to win big games, play consistent football. So I think if anything, you're learning you should probably have Milroe throw downfield more often. That's where he's most dangerous. I see the Crimson Tide winning, and not necessarily saying winning big, but I see them winning by more than a touchdown.
Kenton.
They need to change that young man's name from Bazooka Joe to Sniper Joe or something, because at the moment he could not hit the side of a Super Walmart from the parking lot. And if you've ever seen the Super Walmart in person, those things are massive. With that being said, give me Bama. The reality is very simple. I do think that this is going to be a low-scoring defensive field possession game. And with that being said, if that is the type of game that's played, it's hard for me to go against Bama. It's hard for me to go against Saban. Saban is the ultimate game planner. Like, everybody talks about different coaches and what they do, what they don't do, and all that. Tell me one time that you've seen Bama lose, and at any moment you say, Saban managed the clock incorrectly. He took a bad decision in going forward here. He's done thing X, Y, and Z. I don't trust Heupel as much as I trust Saban. I think Bama gets it done in a close, low-scoring game.
Saban's still great against his assistants, though not perfect any longer. He gets it done against Safe Pick. Safe Pick, Alabama beats Tennessee by at least a score this week. Let's take you to the ACC, where you two guys camp out. Duke, Florida State. Duke 14.5-point dogs on the road after a dominating win against NC State, Dono.
This is a tough one because I wish I had a crystal ball to know for sure that Riley Leonard is back for Duke. Yeah. And even if he is he close to 100%? Because obviously, listen, Mr. Beelan, their backup, did enough, completing 4 out of 10 passes. 2 of those were touchdowns last week to give Duke a W. He's not going to be able to lead Duke to a victory against Florida State. You've got to have Riley Leonard. You've got to have a healthy Riley Leonard back. So if he plays and he's 95%, I'm going to say Duke can cover, because Florida State, in certain games this year, like against Clemson and against Boston College, they're undefeated, but they've had a couple of dicey performances. You could see something like that happening against Duke if Leonard plays. If he doesn't play, I think Florida State covers 14.5. And if we find out he's not playing, that number is going to get bigger than 14.5. So watch out for that. But either way, I see Florida State winning. It's just a matter of how close is it going to be, because nobody is stopping Keon Coleman. That dude is just on another level right now, their wide receiver.
Kenton, you with it?
Duke's defense is elite.
Yeah.
They have an offensive line that is physical. They just pound on you and beat on you. It's just body shot, body shot, body shot. And then you drop the hands. And what does a good boxer do? They hit you with the hook. Unfortunately. Oh,
you meant body shot as in like boxing. Okay.
Yes. Okay. All right. That is.
Sorry, Ken. I just graduated college. We would go to Cancun. I digress.
The Duke kids do not party like that, especially not for football. But that's neither here nor there. The reality is very simple. Too much Keon Coleman. Too much Jared Verse. Too much Kalen DeLoach. This is a Florida State team. Stars at every level. Not good players. Stars. Guys that will go on not just to play on Sundays, guys that we're going to be talking about in terms of, oh, yeah, we got to get him in fantasy draft coming up. And, we talk about Riley Leonard's injury or not. Johnny Wilson, what's going on there, right? Because if he's good, that's another one that can influence this line, because while Duke's secondary is good, while their defensive line is good, and Florida State has struggled a bit up front at times this season, I don't see a world where they can check both Johnny and Keon for an entire game and this thing be close, especially without Riley Leonard, because from what I saw last week and how bad his hobble was, even if he does play this week, he won't be anywhere near the Riley Leonard that we've seen, and his legs are a big, big part of not only his game, but a part of Duke's offense. So with that being said, regardless if Riley Leonard plays or not, regardless of his Henry Beelan, don't matter. You know what I mean? It could be Riley Leonard, Riley from Boondocks, O'Reilly Auto Parts. Give me Florida State. And they're going to cover.
Before we close this thing out, we already covered and sell me why USC and Utah. So we'll give you Penn State, Ohio State, 11 a.m. on Fox. Gus Johnson, Joel Klatt on the call. Kenton, who do you got in this matchup?
These defenses are going to prove to be human. Both of these offenses are going to have very great days. Go the over. I'm going to go 31-28 Penn State.
Penn State with the upset outright, Dono.
I'm going the other way, Ohio State by 3 at home. So I think Penn State will cover, but just not quite enough.
We stay low scoring. I'm going to take Penn State to win this game 20-17, 37 points combined. Penn State gets it done on the road. We got it done today. That's Kenton Gibbs, Locked On ACC and Locked On Wolfpack. That's Alex Dono of Locked On Canes. Drake Toll from Locked On Big 12. Thank you for making Locked On College Football Kickoff Live your lunchtime listen, 11 a.m. to noon Eastern time every single Friday, and wherever you get your podcasts as well. This has been and always will be Locked On College Football Kickoff Live.